So close.
Too much. Yes, sir. Oh, sharp.
Okay, Erev Tov, everyone. Just a public service announcement. I'm not going to be here the rest of this week. I'm not going too far, but I'm not going to be in shul the rest of the week until Shabbat. So you're going to have to keep yourselves busy between Mincha Maariv. We will help out of it. Okay. So I thought we'd talk a little bit tonight. Something very, very interesting that Chazal say. Parashat Balak. Imam Brachot says that Chachamim considered adding Parashat Balak as part of Kriat Shema. Imagine if we had to say that every day, right? Parashat Balak. We have once a year, but they said that they did not add it because of Tirchat Tzibura. It would have been a little bit much to expect people to say. That's the Gemara Brachot. But very, very fascinating idea to think there is something that's so fundamental. It's worth thinking about and exploring what is so fundamental about this parasha, all the parashot of the Torah, that there was a hava amina of the Chachamim to include this as part of Kriat Shema. But the other thing that we learned, so I'll leave you to think about that the rest of the week between Mincha Maariv and I'm not here. But it makes us realize as well that the paragraphs of Kriat Shema are not consecutive paragraphs. We don't even read them in order. It's somewhat artificial that it was put together, but that is what that is the mitzvah that we have. So let's explore a little bit about the mitzvah of Kriat Shema. It's one of the few opportunities we have on a daily basis, a twice daily basis, to fulfill a mitzvah d'oraita. Beyond that many mitzvot that we do constantly all the time, which are mitzvot min Torah, as opposed to mitzvot min Rabbanan, they are, but mitzvah Kriat Shema is one of them. So Rav Melamed writes as follows. It says, mitzvah Kriat Shema. Mitzvah aseh min Torah likro Kriat Shema, b'layla u'b'boker. We have a positive mitzvah from the Torah every morning and every evening to say Kriat Shema. That's why, by the way, we're so makpid and we try to be very, very careful with the time when we daven Shachrin, when we daven Maariv, as you all know, in the summer when we have the early minyan here on Friday night. So we always remind people to say Kriat Shema when you get home because it has to be the right time. That is a mitzvah aseh d'oraita. As it says in the pasuk, which we read as part of Shema, Dibarta bam, b'shoch b'cha v'kumecha, b'shoch b'cha inu b'layla, v'kumecha inu b'boker. Right, the time when you go to sleep, that is night, and when you wake up, that is in the morning. So when we say Kriat Shema, we read three parashiot. The first is the parasha of Shema, right? Sheyesh ba Kabbalat Or Malchut Shamayim, Yichud Hashem, Ve'avato. This contains the elements of accepting the yoke of heaven, right? The oneness of Hashem, love of Hashem. Hashniya, the second paragraph, which we say is Vayam Shamoa, Sheyesh ba Kabbalat Or Mitzvot. That has the central feature there, is accepting the yoke, not just the authority of God in and of himself, so to speak, but also the authority of all the mitzvot. והשלישית ויאמר שיש בציווי על זכירת המצוות על ידי מצוות הציצית ובסיומם הסכים את יציאת מצרים. But the third paragraph, which essentially deals with tzitzit, and also we make mention of Yetziat Mitzrayim. So that's another one I mentioned. I said that we fulfill a mitzvah d'oraita. When we say Kriat Shema, we actually fulfill two mitzvot d'oraita, because remembering Yetziat Mitzrayim every day, that in itself is its own mitzvah. תקנו חכמים להקדים את פרשת שמע Levaya im Shamoa. So the order of the paragraphs is as follows. First we have Shema and then Vaya. כדי שקבל אדם על עצמו מלכות שמיים תחילה ואחר כך או מצוות. We have to accept upon ourselves the authority of the Creator before we can accept the authority of that which He commanded us. והקדימו את פרשת ויה עם שמוע שעוסקת בציווי כללי לשמוע את כל המצוות. ויה עם שמוע, the second paragraph, that is a general, more general command to keep all the mitzvot. So therefore that comes first. Shezmanam bayom v'alayla, all the mitzvot which are during the day and at night, as opposed to the final paragraph of Vayomer, shoseket b'mitzvot tzitzit shezmanam bayom bilvad, which tzitzit is only a mitzvah which applies during the day. Ledat kamal rishonim mitzvah me'atzah likot ha'pasuk Shema Yisrael bilvad. Right. So what exactly is the mitzvah? There are those Rishonim who say the mitzvah of Shema is really just the first paragraph, the first sentence, first pasuk. That is certainly the most important, that is the most central pasuk of Shema Yisrael, right? Upon which it says, "Vayuad v'ma'ela asher nochim etzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shopcha v'kumecha." Chachamim tiknu likro et shalosh parashot. So it could be that on a Torah level you have to say Shema Yisrael, and Chachamim came and added all three paragraphs. Efshar lomar, and we can say, the primary element of the mitzvah of Shema, again, as we say many times, different things that we say. I think we mentioned it last week in the context of Ashrei, when we were talking about Pesukei Zimra. Right? So we mentioned Ashrei, where it says that anybody who says Ashrei every day is a muftach lo shu ben olam haba. Explain what that means. It doesn't just mean the same magical formula, magical incantation. Say it once a day and that's it. Nothing else matters. Whatever else you do, you'll be in olam. No, it means you're going to say it. It's going to bring you to do something. So Shema Yisrael is the same thing. It's not just about saying the words of Shema Yisrael, though that is important. But what is behind it, what is the mitzvah behind it, is saying the words and thinking about what they mean. And thinking about Shema Yisrael, which means Kabbalat Or Malchut Shamayim, that is the essence of the mitzvah. And therefore, just by reading the first pasuk, we have, on a certain level, fulfilled the mitzvah from the Torah. We need to expand. We need to deepen our understanding. What exactly does it mean when we talk about Kabbalat Or Malchut Shamayim? That means you accept the yoke of heaven, you accept the authority of the mitzvot in general terms, more specific terms, etc. So all of that is a deeper fulfillment of that mitzvah. Therefore, the sages established to read all three parshiyot, all three paragraphs. Right? The progression is we remember Hashem, who commanded us. We remember what He commanded us with the mitzvot. We remember tzitzit. Why tzitzit? Because tzitzit remind you of all the mitzvot in which you've been commanded. Now you're all thinking, and why Parashat Balak and Bilam? What's all that got to do with this? So in the end of the day, it wasn't included. Okay, but it's an interesting thought as to why it would have been or should have been included as well. So at the end of the day, he says, and again, there's a lot of discussion about this, but he says at the end of the day, by reading all three paragraphs, it's part of the fulfillment of the mitzvah of Kriat Shema. Now, as we mentioned, there's a separate mitzvah in terms of remembering going out of Egypt. Zichirat Yetziat Mitzrayim. It says, mitzvah me'atorah lizkot Yetziat Mitzrayim b'chol yom. This is a mitzvah which we have every day, as the pasuk says, Leman tizkor et yom tzedcha me'eretz Mitzrayim kol yemei chayecha. Remember going out of Egypt all the days of your life. V'darshu chachamim me'amilah kol. What is the word kol? Every, all. What does that come to teach us? Shemitzvah lizkot Yetziat Mitzrayim b'yom uvalayla. Right. So this is the famous machloket. We have it in the Haggadah Shal Pesach. Ben Zoman Chachamim. It actually appears in the Gemara before it appears in the Haggadah Shal Pesach. But that's whether the inclusion here is by day and by night, or the inclusion here is in this world and in the future, after the future redemption as well. But in any event, we say over here that we say Yetziat Mitzrayim we mention by night as well. If Shalakayim et mitzvah by matkol pasuk shemazkeret bo Yetziat Mitzrayim. Again, and similar to other mitzvot we have, Parshat Zachor and other similar discussions over there. Any pasuk that you would have said that mentions Yetziat Mitzrayim, you would have fulfilled this mitzvah. Or if a person was to say, oh, I remember going out of Egypt, you fulfilled it, you've remembered it. However, the paragraph of Vayomer is added on to Kriat Shema. One is that includes the mitzvah of tzitzit, which reminds us of all the mitzvot. And the second one is, and when we mention Yetziat Mitzrayim. And that's why we say Vayomer also at night. You might have thought, we mentioned before, one of the reasons why this is the third paragraph and not the second paragraph is because it only relates to tzitzit, only relates to the mitzvah during the day. So you would have said, okay, so if it relates to the mitzvah during the day, say it when you say Kriat Shema during the day, and you don't have to say it at night. If tzitzit was the only reason for that, that would be right. But because we have the mitzvah of Yetziat Mitzrayim as well, therefore we also say it at night. Right? It's brought in Yetziat Brachot, Kesef Mishnah. הבדל ישנו בין מצוות קריאת שמע למצוות זכירת יציאת מצרים, שמצוות קריאת שמע של יום אפשר לקיים רק בשלוש שעות הראשונות של היום. Another difference between these two mitzvot, although the mitzvah of Yetziat Mitzrayim, which is attached to Kriat Shema, but Kriat Shema is limited in the time that we can say it. So when it says b'shoch b'cha v'kumecha, the time you wake up and the time you go to sleep, it's not the time nowadays that people just decide when they want to wake up and when to go to sleep. The Gemara says, what is considered the time? And the Gemara goes through different hours of the day, different categories of people would wake up. So we consider the first 3 hours of the day, the first 3 halachic hours, of course, without getting into now a detailed discussion about the technicalities of how that's calculated. But the first 3 hours of the day, that is considered Zman b'shoch b'cha, and that is the b'kumecha. And that is the time in which you can say the mitzvah of Kriat Shema. שאז הוא הזמן שקמים מהשינה, that's the time we wake up. ואילו במצוות זכירת יציאת מצרים של היום, אפשר לקיים בכל היום. You could have fulfilled the mitzvah of remembering יציאת מצרים, that you can do all day. אלא שלפי תקנת חכמים, but the sages established, אנו מקיימים אותנו קריאת שמע, that we should do it together with קריאת שמע, and therefore you should say it together, and you should make sure to say it in the right amount of time. He mentions here as well, it's interesting, it's a bit of a strange thing. The time for saying Kriat Shema extends until the 3rd hour of the day. The time in which we can say the brachot of Kriat Shema actually extends until the 4th hour of the day. So if somebody missed and it was late, sometimes this comes up on Shabbos, when davening is a little bit later. In Chutz La'aretz, it comes up all the time. But with davening is a little bit later. And if a person is davening with a minyan where they know that the time when you're going to get to Kriat Shema with a minyan, it's going to be past the 3rd hour of the day. So then what you should do is really you should say Kriat Shema in the morning before Shachrit. You should say all 3 paragraphs to fulfill the mitzvah, and then you say it again together with the brachot. That's acceptable as well. Rabbi Chananya ben Akash אומר שהקדוש ברוך הוא לזכות ישראל, לפיכך בא להם תורה מצוות, 12 אדוני חפץ למען צדקו, יגדיר תורה וידע.